Greetings folks, in this video I want to talk about the new Asus ROG G15. This one features the Ryzen 4800H and the RTX 2060. Nice build quality here, and for $1,399 this might be the best build quality, or let's say the nicest laptop that we will be able to get over the next few months at least, featuring the new Ryzen 7 4000 series CPU. So what I want to do is just take a look at this, maybe compare it with the G14, do a little public service announcement about a few things regarding those two laptops, maybe compare it with a few other ones out there and see if this is going to be a pretty good value out there, because in my opinion this is the one that I have the highest hopes for, and I'd like to share with you my thoughts on it as to where it stands right now, because overall I think it looks pretty decent. So a few vendors so far, such as Excalibur PC, and let's see, who else do we have here? Amazon listing features the Excalibur PC, we have Exotic PC, HID Evolution, Gentek PC. Looks like they are all featuring this same spec machine for $1,399. And for that, we're going to get a 240 Hz Pantone validated IPS type display. All that means is that it is technically an IPS panel, but since it's not made by LG, LG has the rights to calling it IPS. So anytime you see something that's IPS type, that just typically means that it's still an IPS panel, but they're not allowed to legally call it IPS. They call it IPS type, thanks to LG, owning the rights to IPS. So for that, you're going to get full HD, 240 Hertz, and a little bit of research on my end, and I'm sort of able to figure out what sort of color reproduction we can get on that. Now, as of right now, HID Evolution is the only place that seems to be able to share any sort of color reproduction, and I think some of those details are a little incorrect, but let me try to decipher that for you, as it does look pretty good. Now, as you can see here, we are looking at this custom ROG G15 here, and by custom, ultimately you can just select a few things to change it up a little bit, which is just fine. But just covering the basis here, they do have some information on the display, and they are calling this 68% NTSC and 72% standard RGB. Those two numbers don't line up too well at all, so even if it is 68% NTSC, and it's very likely that it's actually 72% NTSC, that's going to get us really close to 100% standard RGB, and that too lines up with the Adobe percentage at around 75%. So I do have very high hopes for color reproduction on this panel. Now, as far as response time, ideally I would like to say this is 3 milliseconds, and honestly, before the most recent TUF 506, every single 144 Hertz panel I had ever reviewed had a really nice response time. At the worst case scenario was about 9 milliseconds, and they were all 94% standard RGB or better, and that laptop opened up a whole new can of worms. So while I can't guarantee this panel is going to be great, I think I have the highest hopes for this being the best display available on Ryzen Mobile 4000 series, at least over the next few months. So fingers crossed, and that could be a deal breaker if it's not, but I feel pretty good that it should be. So here I just want to discuss a few things real quick about the G14 and the G15. So we have the G14 here, and it's $50 more than the G15. And the difference between the two, aside from the actual size, once again, if you need that small form factor, the G14 is going to be your best bet. But some of the differences between the two is going to be the graphics card. So if you spec out the 2060, you're going to get the 90-watt variant inside of the G15 and the 65-watt variant inside the G14. Now, what does that extra wattage do? It's just going to give you a higher clock speed before power limit throttling kicks in. And in the real world, that might only equate to 10 or 15%, but that can be a substantial amount to some, and others can shrug it off like it's nothing, and that's fine. But just a little public service announcement, that way you kind of know where the two stand. Now, both the G14 and G15 do not feature a webcam. The G14 does not have the actual LAN port, so it will be Wi-Fi only unless you use a dongle. The G14 only features a single NVMe slot, so if you need more storage, you won't be able to add additional storage. You will have to replace the storage that's in there currently, whereas the G15 does have 2 NVMe slots, so you do have twice the storage capability. Now, when it comes to memory, 8 gigabytes of that memory is soldered onto the motherboard on both G14 and G15. That means enthusiasts out there that want to put in a little bit faster memory, at least from a CAS latency standpoint, to get something a little bit better than what might be the standard, which looks like 3200 megahertz at CL22. Those that want to get something a little bit faster, I know it's a very niche market, but you will be unable to do so unless we can somehow unlock the BIOS and do some of the memory tweaks. Very unlikely scenario, but in the small chance that we can do that, there is that potential. Just don't expect it. So the reason I bring up the one soldered memory DIMM and the one available is that you can see here, you can order this in 16 or 24 gigabytes of memory. And that will tell you that 8 gigabytes is soldered, and then you can get a 16 gigabyte DIMM that you can replace and install in your machine, ultimately adding up to 24 gigabytes of memory. You really don't want to do this. You know, mixing brand names lately has been okay, but mixing capacities can be a bad thing. So you want to have dual channel memory pretty much at all costs, especially on gaming laptops. And if you saturate beyond 16 gigabytes of memory on this particular solution, you're going to have some performance issues. And the wonderful thing about Windows is it does scale to the amount of memory you have up to a certain extent, but as a down point, that could also mean that you may end up running more than 16 gigabytes of memory when you wish not to, because it can cause some performance impacts. Those would reveal themselves in, let's say, a game where maybe you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and you've got your settings maxed out. And I don't know for sure how much memory that game uses. Perhaps Cyberpunk 2077 may do something like this too. Just games that are really memory intensive, right? And let's say we've got 16 gigs of RAM on our machine, and now the machine is happily using maybe 13 or 14 gigabytes and it's doing just fine. But if you give it some more memory, it may try to use that. And if it goes past that 16 gigabytes, it's no longer going to be using dual channel, and what you can see from a performance impact may look something like this. The CPU will just randomly peg itself to 100%, which is going to be bonkers because these are wonderful CPUs with 16 threads, and then you're going to see your GPU percentage or utilization actually drop. And as a result of those two things combined, you're going to see your frame rate dip. And a very weird solution to that, when people will eventually ask me this on the channel, Bob, how can I fix this? And then I ask some questions and we figure out you're using one of these laptops, I'm probably going to tell you to take out that 16 gigabytes of memory and put in 8 gigabytes of memory and see if that improves performance, or adjust some of the settings that impact that kind of memory. And that might be a little bit harder to do than versus just, you know, putting in a smaller memory DIMM, because you might not be able to control the amount of memory your system is using all that easily. And it sounds weird to actually go from 16 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes, so that way you're running in dual channel, but that can be a solution. I know it's a very niche one, but you don't want to mix capacities, as it can cause performance issues as you use up a lot of that available memory. So with that said, at $1,400, you get a terabyte of storage, a 90 watt, assuming it's a 90 watt 2060, that seems to be the going rate nowadays versus the 80 watt unit. An awesome CPU. Man, I really like that much storage. Windows 10 Pro, that's pretty cool. So for $50 less versus the G14, you're gonna get a system that probably performs about 10 or 15% better and offers twice the storage capability, and what's very likely to give us a better panel out of this, especially when it comes to response time. All that for $50 less. Now, none of this matters if you need to embrace that small form factor of the G14, but those are the differences between the two. If you demand this CPU in your presence and you want what looks like to be one of the better laptops that we can get our hands on featuring that CPU, Ryzen 4000 series, then this one's probably your best bet. Now, if you compare that with something such as this particular Predator Helios 300 with the 9750H, at $1,130, this features half a terabyte of storage. The battery is a little bit smaller versus the G14 and G15. I believe that is a 76 watt hour battery, and this one's like a 50 something watt hour battery. So not a great battery life in here at all. And by no means am I trying to sell you on the fact that this is a much better laptop, but I'm just trying to show you guys some comparisons with some prices. So at $270 less You get a 1660 Ti, which I believe is a 90-watt unit in this, so it performs kind of close to the 2060 at 90 watts. You know, it's, in fact, a few games it's a little better, but generally speaking across the board, the 2060 will outperform this by a little bit. You get half a terabyte of storage, dual channel memory, of course, both DIMMs, you can replace them, which is very nice. There's also a second NVMe slot and a 2.5-inch drive. The RGB zone lighting there, kind of cool, I suppose, if you're into that. And the display is 144 hertz, 3 milliseconds, and probably around that 96 to 98% standard RGB. So it's a good panel that's very fast. However, these displays on this particular laptop are notorious for backlight bleed, and you're going to have to play the lottery on that one to see if you can get one that does not have a tremendous amount of backlight bleed. But admittedly, on these, they do tend to have that. And unless it's been sorted out over the last 6 months, that was sort of the standard that they had set, unfortunately, when these were released and people were reviewing them. So at $270, you could add another $100, now you got a terabyte and a half in there. Is that worth it? Then you got to start looking at, well, the 9750H, Bob, I would much rather have the 4800H. Yeah, I know, me too. And when it comes to gaming, you're probably not going to tell the difference, honestly. I mean, we really can't even saturate 8 threads across most titles. There is a few out there where you will, and then 6-core, 12 threads is still sufficient for pretty much everything out there. And of course, 8-core, 16 threads is just overkill, which I am all about. So if you were to try to justify something like this to save yourself a little bit of money, I totally dig it, but it kind of makes you think a little bit, right? Like the $1,400 G15, price-wise, a little bit more than this, but I don't know, man, kind of worth it in my opinion. So, you know, we're getting kind of close there. We've got some good storage options with the G15, some expandability. Not a fan about the soldered memory, but as long as you spec it out correctly with, you know, 8 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes, I think you're going to be okay. So maybe we can take this one off the list. What about the Mag 15, right? That one has a webcam, has Windows Hello, has 115 watts, 1660 Ti with Electro Boost. You're going to have to do a little tuning with that. Of course, you get a bunch of accessories. I can't speak for this cable or headset, but I do use the mouse and mouse pad, and they're very nice, pretty thick mouse pad. Magnesium alloy, light build, glass Windows Precision trackpad, mechanical keyboard, but it still has that 9750H, but this is a very nice build quality. But now we're paying $100 more, and we get half a terabyte of storage. Now there is another M.2 slot in there to occupy. Nonetheless, this actual laptop will be faster than that G15. If you weren't monitoring it though, you probably wouldn't be able to tell, but I know a lot of you out there are very in tune with, you know, monitoring that and seeing how your hardware is doing. So this technically would have a faster GPU. But nonetheless, very nice display here. This one came out at like 353 nits and 98% standard RGB, I think. So it's a really good panel. No complaints there. The memory's not soldered in. Overall, pretty nice enthusiast laptop, but you are paying a little bit more for it. And once again, man, you know, for $13.99 on the G15 versus this, it's starting to be a tough call. I think a lot of people are going to say it's not a tough call at all, Bob. I want that 4800H, and man, I got your back there on that. You know, that's not a bad solution. So we're starting to run, you know, pretty close here. There is a few other little things I want to talk about. The only reason I want to bring this up, I'm not trying to shill electronics. I'm going to get nothing for, you know, linking this information from their site to you guys, but you deserve to know. You can get the Max 15, which is 3.8 pounds, 3.82 pounds for $1,400, so the same price as that G15. And yes, it's got that 9750H. I know no one's a fan of that right now. 115 watts, 2060 Max P. Let's see, half a terabyte of storage, dual channel memory. I mean, this thing is complete out the door. And last time I checked, at least for the continental US people, if you order from electronics, I don't think they charge tax. Double check that, but at $13.99, that's pretty awesome. Of course, you got a very nice 144 hertz panel, low response time on that. Windows IR camera for Windows Hello. Of course, it's located at the bottom of the bezel, but at least it's there. So there's a few laptops out there that do have competitive value against the G15, until of course you factor in that CPU, starting to make the G15 maybe not look too bad. Of course, you can remove the memory DIMMs in here, which is very nice. We have very comparable storage in here with two M.2s. The battery on this, though, might only be like a 62 watt hour, so realistically expect about maybe 40 minutes less runtime than you would get out of a G15 or 14. Once you load the system up and start using it like you normally would, the battery life is going to be a little bit less than what would be on the manufacturer's box. But nonetheless, decent. The one that I think we would only have to recommend would be the TUF 506. If the panel was nice, I guess in the whole grand scheme of all this is what disappoints me the most. If they put a good panel in here, we've got an 80 watt 1660 Ti, dual channel memory of course that we can remove, half a terabyte of storage with an extra storage slot, you know, M.2, NVMe, and the 90 watt hour battery in this particular model for $999. Just that 144 hertz display is absolutely atrocious. What's my point in all this? Well, I think the G15 shows some promise. I'm not a fan of the soldered memory, but at least we get a faster GPU and more storage options. We are missing the webcam on that, but at least it does have a built-in microphone along with the G14. It has a LAN port, so the local area network port is pretty nice to have. GPU is decent in there. It should be pretty promising from a FPS, you know, to dollar value for the CPU that you're getting. Everything about it does look to be pretty nice and comparable to some other laptops that are out there. And man, it sure is a shame about this one here. Man, Asus, if you put a better panel in here, I think people would still buy that Zephyrus just for the better build quality. But this thing would just fly right off the shelves. So all in all, I think we might have a winner here, especially for the CPU. Let me know if you want me to review this. I'd like to get my hands on one of these. We'll see what our finances are looking like in a month from now, thanks to COVID. Yeah, the prices across the board so far from all the vendors that are selling it seem to be legit at $13.99, so nobody seems to be inflating the price, at least as far as we know. The display color accuracy on the G15 looks to be promising based on this weird information here, but fingers crossed. The G14, if you need that form factor, what else are you going to go with? I mean, that's your jam right there. The Max 15, they are clearancing these things out, so they're dirt cheap, and this will probably be the fastest laptop in the whole entire mix, hands down. In fact, I'll link it in the description below, a video showcasing a lot of these 1660 Ti's, 2060s, 2070s with different wattages and what kind of frame rates you get in a static environment. And the 2060 max speed 115 watts is definitely a heck of a value. So check that video out, it's very short. Let's see, this one here would be just the dream machine if they put a better panel in it, but they didn't. The almighty Helios 300 from last year, still holding its own at $270 less than the G15. But while some can justify this, I wouldn't argue. I think some can justify some of the other laptops here. So I think they're priced relatively competitive. Some may actually dig this, no question about it, and some may think twice. And of course, the Mag 15 is kind of its own being with its mechanical keyboard and properly placed webcam, IR camera, and this bag of goodies here. And this is not a laptop that is going to get refreshed with anything anytime soon. So all in all, I don't know, this isn't too bad as long as you can embrace some of those shortcomings here. I kind of dig it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'm Bob of All Trades, and I'll see you in the next video.